Welcome to From the Frontline Surgeons Voices, the American College of Surgeons Bulletin Brief. With me is our President-Elect, Dr. Wayne Meredith, who is the Richard T. Myers Chair of the Department of Surgery at Wake Forest University. Welcome, Dr. Meredith.
So glad to be here. Thank you for doing these for everybody, Steve. They've been really great.
Well, my pleasure. I enjoy and I learn a lot from doing them. Thank you for the opportunity and privilege to be doing these videos, indeed. Today, we're going to speak with you not about your role as President-Elect per se or the college, but very specifically about the episode that you released, the Fireside Chat episode, during the recent Quality and Safety Conference. It was a jam-packed agenda with spectacular topics. The Fireside Chats were particularly captivating, and yours drew a lot of attention. So I'd like to first ask you, how did you come upon your speaker, Selwyn Vickers, and your topic?
Well, the organizers of the meeting had been at some other meetings we were in. The college has formed a task force on racism, and which we are looking at all the issues that we can do to improve the structural racism within the college, the racism in the profession of surgery, and maybe even racism in other country where we can influence it. So this task force was working along, and we're having lots of different conversations about it. And I think some of the organizers of the Safety and Quality Conference heard some of those conversations and realized just how great Selwyn Vickers is about describing the issues and having candid conversations. And so they asked him if he would do a fireside chat and asked me if I would moderate it, if I would interview him for it.
Well, it was an excellent idea that Cliff Coe and the others who put the Quality and Safety Conference together had. It was a fantastic, very, very gripping and motivational interview. Unfortunately, I suspect not everybody watching our interview today attended the Quality and Safety Conference. I would urge everybody listening and watching to do so. The content is still available online, and one can register and easily access it. The interview was just under 25 minutes, I believe, and well worth every second.
But it's free. It's free, and it's fantastic, really.
The price is right, and there are many other fireside chats, Dr. Roosh, Dr. Ferrata, Dr. Hoy, Dr. Turner, many fireside chats, plus, of course, all the educational content from quality and safety, a lot of cancer themes, and I second what you say, Dr. Meredith. People should access and avail themselves, and I hope they will of our annual clinical congress, which also has the same unbelievable price tag of free.
That's right.
Talk about value for money. But just in case people haven't yet seen it, I'd like you to share with us some of your thoughts today, which I think will be compelling as to why people should see it. What first grabbed me was the conversation that you and Selwyn had at the beginning about color bold and color brave. Perhaps you could detail that a little bit for us.
You know, it actually was Selwyn, who's a very good friend, professionally anyway, and someone that I'm able to have candid conversations with. And he taught me this concept, really, that, you know, I have lived my life without being racist and hoping to eliminate what implicit bias I had. I didn't know about implicit bias when I was 30 years old, but I didn't. And I had really tried to just see everybody as the same and be colorblind. And that has served me well in many circumstances. But Selwyn taught me to realize that that's actually not quite fair. It is better to be, as we describe it, color brave or color bold. And that means to get mature enough and confident enough and comfortable enough and informed enough to literally be able to understand where people of color are coming from, a little bit more about the narrative of the experience of being a Black person in America. And you know, to a white person, that's a painful feeling to get. It's a painful admission. It's a painful experience to get closer to that and see it from that other side. But it is really not enough for us to be colorblind. We need to be color bold. And it's probably getting off the topic from what we said in the meeting a little bit, but just in my experience, there's probably a spectrum of people that we will have that with in our lives. There's some people that I don't know well enough. I need to be colorblind with them. And there's some people that I can have casual conversations about race with. And there's some people that I know well enough that I appreciate them. And a part of what I appreciate them is their race and their experience of getting to where they are. And that's value added to me in my relationship with them, right? So there's that aspect of being color bold. And the other aspect is just doing nothing is often not enough, right? We need to be in a society where those areas of structural racism that occur, those areas of implicit bias which are expressed often accidentally, sometimes intentionally, we shouldn't be tolerating those. We should carefully and professionally bring those out and mention them. And those areas where we see the system is rigged, whether it's blatantly race-based questions on the MCAT exams or on in-service exams, right? If every gunshot wound on an in-service exam is black, we need to address that. We need to go think that through. So that's being color brave is doing more than just trying to ignore the issue, just trying to see everybody as the same, but appreciate how people are experiencing the narrative that got them where they are, the narrative that got our country where it is. Internalize that and try to do something about it.
Thank you. And indeed, as you talk about some of those issues, one of the stories, and Dr. Vickers recounted many different anecdotes about people coming home from war in uniforms and people being greeted at hotels, all manner of things, all of which were highly impactful and very memorable. Within it, though, was a common theme that he you helped him weave, about failure and privilege. And he had the analogy of the football game with the losing yards. And perhaps you could go into that a little bit about failure and privilege, because I think it's a really important topic for people to realize.
You know, when I first started hearing the term white privilege, it upset me. And it didn't upset me in a positive, helpful way. I didn't like it. I didn't agree that it existed. I did not really feel like I've had privileges. I felt like everything I've ever done, I've earned. And there's an element of that, all right? There's nothing ever been given to me, but I started out in a different place. And someone sent me, I think maybe someone sent me a video of a demonstration that I found incredibly powerful and changed my opinion and my understanding of it to a much deeper level. And I'll describe this video if you'll let me do that. So the video, imagine setting a stage of about 50 college kids of all types standing on a starting line, and a coach says, we are now going to have a race, 100 yards, and the winner, the first person to the finish line, gets this $100 bill. Everybody ready? Everybody ready. Now, before we start, though, I need to ask you a few questions. If you grew up in a family with two parents, take 2 steps forward. Everybody, a bunch of them took 2 steps forward. If you've never had your cell phone cut off because you didn't get the cell phone bill paid, take a step forward. If you got into college without debt, take a step forward. If your parents only worked one job to get you to in this college, take a step forward. And went through a series of obvious things like that. And by the time that was done, they panned the camera back and they saw that we were getting ready to start this race with some of the people almost halfway to the $100 bill. Through nothing they ever did themselves, through nothing that they no contribution they had made got them that far. And the people who were behind them through no fault of decisions they've made, through no actions that they've taken. But when that race begins, the people that are halfway there are going to be much more likely to get to that $100 bill. And if someone from the back of the pack actually wins that $100 bill, they're going to have to run faster with better technique than the people who are halfway there. And both of those are through no fault of their own, right? And that, to me, helped me understand what we're talking about with white privilege. It doesn't need, I don't need to feel guilty about the place I had as a starting place in life. But I do need to appreciate how other people have gotten there. And I've learned from other folks, and I've had lots of deep conversations about race, and a way lot more since George Floyd was killed, and the public sentiment of it. And I have begun to sort of internalize this at a level where I've had those conversations, and I've learned from that there is a sense of agency and a sense of a common theme among my successful Black friends, that I have to live my life above reproach. I cannot make a single mistake. If I make a mistake, and the privilege to fail, the privilege to try something that you might not succeed at, the privilege to do something part way, I am much more likely to be forgiven for that paper getting turned in late. My book chapter, I'm sending you a book chapter, or maybe not, but in general, in society, they're much less likely to be concerned of my turning in it late, and much less likely to implicitly think, well, of course, I gave him a try to do this, and sure enough, he failed, right? And to live your entire life trying to succeed, to race for that $100 bill, being that far behind, and maybe even having to carry a backpack during the race. Everybody in this country needs to understand that's what that experience is like, because we cannot help, we cannot interrelate, we cannot change our world to be better until we go through the pain of understanding that that's an experience that people we care about are having every day, and we're paying no attention to it. That, to me, was a really powerful video.
Very, very powerful indeed. And I don't want to steal all of Dr. Vickers' thunder talking about more of the stories recounted during the interview. So instead, I'd like to ask you, as President-Elect of the College, if you could describe for our listeners and viewers some of the initiatives that the ACS has underway that is apropos of your fireside chat with Dr. Vickers.
Well, the Board of Regents obviously was, like everybody in the country, moved deeply and immediately moved quickly to create a statement condemning racism and planning to do the things that we can do to get rid of it. And it was very genuine and very heartfelt. I watched it happen. I was there as President-Elect. And I believe that. But we also realized that what is needed is not a statement. What is needed is a contribution to the cause. And so they appointed a task force, and they asked me to chair a task force and to look at racism, the issue of racism, and what the American College of Surgeons should do about it. I appointed a task force of people that have the following characteristics. There were people who were committed to the issue, whom I knew understood it and were committed to it. Lots of surgeons of color, lots of leaders of color, but lots of other regents and other powerful people who are white and other races and other genders. And so we appointed that committee. They needed to be someone passionate about the issue, who understood the workings of the college well enough to know how the college worked and what things could be happening in the college that were unrecognized structural racism and some of those things. And they needed to be powerful enough in American surgery, powerful enough in the American College of Surgeons, that we would have an unignorable voice when we made recommendations to the Board of Regents. And so we did all of those things. I do not want to jump to the end of that chapter and put on this video the recommendations we're going to make to the Board of Regents, because I want the Regents to consider them, and I do not want them to feel like I have gone out in public and put this stake out that they now have to come out to, because I'd much rather have them consider them without any resentment of my having done that. But I will say, we have systematically gone through in we created a very candid culture to really talk about the narrative and the experience of the world. And in general, we've talked about 3 areas where we need to work. We talked about the zone of control. There are things within the American College of Surgeons over which we have control. And one of those things would be such things as the process for ascending through officerships, the process for getting appointed to be the moderator at a panel, the process for some of those things. There are some structural things in the college we need to look at and make sure that they are done. There are some structural things about making sure that the way, when it comes times to say who should be on the program committee, or the program committee needs to appoint 3 panelists to give a panel on colorectal disease. Does our process work like everybody who's already sitting at the table says, who do you know that could do this? And then you put up there, and ultimately when people of color, surgeons of color, come to that meeting and they look and they say, well, all the people that are leading this, none of them look like me. There must not be a place for me in leadership there. That could happen. So how do we actively make sure that when people come to a panel session at the College Clinical Congress, that they see leadership and visibility, right? We have to avoid the black tax, right? You can't have everybody you can't make, just by being black doesn't mean you have extra duties and extra work and have to do all the other stuff. But by the same token, we need to go and find other people, and do we have purposeful ways of doing that? So things like that are in our zone of control. There's a zone of influence. The American College of Surgeons is very influential in the profession of surgery. And there are things we could do in collaboration with, in guidance of, in service to the American Board of Surgery, the American Surgical, all the surgical professional societies, the state chapters, maybe even the AMA or the AAMC or the RRC in surgery, that could be opportunities to educate people about the things I was just talking about: white privilege, the narrative, the history of being black in America, how it affects the way we treat patients, how it makes people feel when they are patients and what we can do to that, differential access, disparities of care in this country. There are things we could do to help other societies and to influence other societies or inform other societies about their duty to our world to be better at race. One of my sayings is, I've spent my life in the pursuit of being an excellent surgeon, right? Our motto is to serve all with skill and fidelity. I'm a trauma surgeon. I serve all, right? There are no filters to get to me as a trauma surgeon. But I have also spent a great deal of my life working on honing my skill and fidelity. And I realized during this time, I have not worked on my skill at race. I have not worked to be excellent at race much. I have not learned to be great at making sure my patient, who's a black patient, understands that I want him to be able to trust me. I want him to be able to have access to everything that anybody else has access to that he needs to get over his, blunt femur fracture. And I have not been doing that. I have not been excellent enough at race. I have not been excellent enough at race in the making sure I have actively tried to recruit minority surgeons and recruit minority residents, and the diversity in our program is much greater. But there are areas of understanding the narrative of how far they may have been behind in the race, or how heavy their backpack has been in the race, that I have not done. I think we can provide and encourage all professional societies to get better at that, because the pursuit of excellence is in our DNA as surgeons. And the awareness that this is an area as important as tying secure knots is, that we need to get good at. I think there's an area for that. Then the last zone is our zone of influence. So there's a zone of control, a zone of influence, and a zone of concern. So our third zone is a zone of concern, and that is such things as federal policies, what should we do to weigh in on healthcare payment policies, healthcare other structures, policies for certifying hospitals, other kinds of public policies that promote disparities of care or fail to dissolve disparities of care or address disparities of care. That's a zone of influence, and we can be that's a zone of concern. We don't have a lot of absolute control or even absolute influence over CMS policy or federal housing policy or things that are done in the voting booth. But we have some, it is a zone of concern. We need to be aware of what's going on in those areas and find those areas where we have influence and put them down. So those are the kinds of things that this task force is going to make recommendations to the Board of Regents. We're going to try to break them out as to things that we think that can be done right away, things that we think are going to take some time to do, but maybe could be accomplished in a year or two, and those things that will take forever that we have to be working on always from now on. We're trying to break them out in those ways. And I think the Board of Regents has a very strong appetite for having some of those laid out. And I think the American College of Surgeons will be a way better citizen in American medicine and way better servants to America's surgeons after we begin to implement some of these programs and create some of these offerings. I'm really optimistic about it.
Thanks very much. And I'm really optimistic that under your leadership, we are going to realize all those very, very important goals. It's great hearing your thoughts, not only based upon the interview, but based upon what's being done at the college under your leadership. So thanks so much for your time today. And thank you for everything you do every day on behalf of our patients throughout the country as the President-Elect of the American College of Surgeons. I hope to see you in person as opposed to virtually one of these days when we can get this episode of COVID-19 behind us.
Well, Steve, thanks for doing this. I think these are really great. Sign up for the Quality and Safety Conference. It's free and it's good. And don't forget to sign up for the Clinical Congress. It's free and it's going to be as good as ever. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Stay well.
I will.